you check the children?
Hi, I'm Chucky. Wanna play?
Sometimes that is better.
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
Long days and pleasant nights, fellow travelers along the path of the beam. I'm known on this level of the tower as Jaime and Fuego, and if you please, you join me here for a bit of very special birthday weekend palaver on Hail to Stephen King. Hell yes, oh man. So, interesting thing that I've mentioned on this program before, and it's, boy, we are nearing 250 episodes in the next few months, which is crazy. I basically started this show back in 2016 to do a special celebration of Sai King's 69th birthday and basically tell people why they should read Stephen King. And the program continues every Saturday here on The Horror Show, and bienvenidos, welcome obviously, to this day. And my birthday's actually a day before Sai King's. September 20, September 21st, for the man, my favorite author, who has published so many amazing books over a 40-plus year career. And yeah, it took me about 7 years to read all of them and a rigorous journey. But so with the recent King-assance that transpired, and I had some speculation at one particular point that it was waning and that slowing down, whatever, it in 2017 was just such a big bit of craziness, more so than the horror or the general filmmaking community, especially a lot of those industry pundits were expecting. And yeah, it continued for the next couple of years, and I thought, once again, like I just said, that it was kind of calming down a bit, but I did some recent research for an upcoming panel that is going to feature Mike from Mike's Book Reviews, Blue Gilland from Cemetery Dance, and also Lou Sisma. I always hope I'm pronouncing his name properly, along with an old buddy of mine who was on a Dark Tower panel many years ago named Sarah. And so I did some research about just not only the amount of adaptations that we've had to this day of Sai King stuff since starting with Carrie in 1976, but just all of the stuff that is still in various stages of development, whether pre-production, scripting, trying to, get all of those proverbial pieces in place, whatever. And did y'all know there's been like 100 adaptations, whether there's been 49 feature films, there's also been, I'm going to consult my numbers, 32 different television, either films, event, miniseries, whatever, and there's been 19 spin-off sequel sort of stuff. So we're talking like all those damn Children of the Corn movies, man. And yes, Mangler sequel, sometimes they come back. I've covered a lot of them here on Hail to Stephen King in a series that I entitled Films That Forgot the Face of Their Father. I personally find merit in a lot of them, but that is not the point. Today we are going to be briefly just discussing the extensive amount of King stuff that is in the King itinerary as far as things that are in various stages of development. Now, there's a couple that we have heard mentioned and we still get the occasional update on, but they've been in these sort of development hells for years. That's stuff like Cujo, which is it's like Canine Unit Joint Operations. Very strange spin-off initially announced way back in 2015. I don't want to see that, but hey, whatever. They say it's still happening at some point, at least on the IMDb. Also the 10 O'Clock People. Personal favorite of mine. Very creepy one, and about just, nicotine addiction, and when you're just in that sweet spot of not being super addicted anymore, but still have enough of it in your system, you can perceive these strange vampiric-like creatures that have apparently taken over some of the most prominent roles of people in the world. And then lastly, Suffer the Little Children, which is also, I believe, from Nightmares and Dreamscapes, like 10 O'Clock was. And yeah, that's one about this school teacher who she thinks some of her grade school kids, one in particular initially is like, he's not himself anymore, he's like staring at her, and she thinks he's been possessed by a doppelganger, and she kills a bunch of kids. It's a really effed up story. But yeah, so those are the three that we don't have like as many concrete details about. I know Suffer the Little Children, I believe is a Dollar Baby at one particular point, which is King's program where he, allows somebody to option the rights to one of his stories for $1. It's pretty dope. He's been doing that for decades at this point. But yeah, so Suffer the Little Children, who knows, same with 10 O'Clock and with the strange Cujo acronym going down. But everything else we have more concrete details about. So FX is developing another adaptation of Carrie. Yes, and this one will apparently be a series that deals with an LGBTQT sort of person and just ridicule, the hatred, the bullying that goes on. Now, normally I would not be as into a new Carrie because we've had 3 already between the television series on NBC, the remake with Chloe Grace Moretz, and also, you know, the Space Set Classic. But with that angle, I'm a little bit more open to the idea. Then we also have Warner Brothers that is putting together a new feature film version of Salem's Lot. Yes, the Tobe Hooper classic is fantastic, and I was not a fan of the TNT remake in the 2000s, but this is a story that I still don't believe has been given its proper brutal justice in a lot of ways, and I'm rocking my Father Callahan today, so how about them apples? Applesauce, bitch. Anyway, yeah, Salem's Lot, I believe James Wan is at least in hand in some sort of producing role, but his constant protege Gary Dauberman, who I'm not the biggest fan of, yeah, last I checked he was scripting and or directing, but yeah, but another Salem's Lot, bring it. And speaking of a corresponding sort of like tie-in, we have the Epics series starring Adrian Brody, originally titled Jerusalem's Lot, and you know, Jerusalem's Lot is kind of the pseudo prequel of sorts, giving some very scary additional history of the aforementioned town from Salem's Lot centuries before, but they have retitled it Chapelwaite, and yeah, that is one that we have some very concrete details about. I would love to see just further exploration done better than on the second season of Castle Rock about that, about the town of Jerusalem's Lot. I feel like there's a lot of rich, very scarific and gross out history. If you read Jerusalem's Lot and just the investigation that guy goes about, holy smokes, it's some effed up stuff. Another one that I'm stoked is at least trying to get just the wheels in motion for is the Jaunt, and the Jaunt is a terrific science fiction story. King doesn't delve into sci-fi as much as I love he would, and this is from Skeleton Crew, or at least that's where it was collected, and Andy Muschietti, dude behind it, is the one who is spearheading this project, and yeah, he's also trying to get Roadwork made as well, so those are two that Andy, following the success of you know, just boy, everything it's, and you know, helping segue in the King of Sons. That's one that I cannot wait to see turn into something. Another one that has had various previous attempts to be put into motion is The Long Walk. Long Walk is the great kind of dystopian Death Games story about all of these kids. It's like more of a sci-fi horror themed Stand By Me in a lot of ways, because all these kids are marching, and the last one standing, they basically wins whatever he wants for the rest of his life, and it's a very just totalitarian government sort of situation, and great camaraderie amongst the kids. But if you slow down behind, I believe it's 5 miles an hour, because they're all just supposed to keep marching, no sleep, no whatever, you're shot by a firing squad. So yeah, The Long Walk, that one is something else. But yeah, New Line Cinema appears to be finally getting that one going, which I can't wait for. Now, the biggie is the one that is confirmed to be releasing December 11th of next year, and that is none other than this new reimagining of The Stand for CBS All Access, Josh Boone being behind it, as well as Owen, King's son, and a whole host of actors, 9 episodes. I believe King has penned a new epilogue that I guess goes even beyond, presumably, what we had as far as, like, you know, the circle closing and all that stuff, which I have mixed feelings about this one. I like some of the casting, like Heather Graham, and I guess I'm okay with a much more pretty boy Randall Flagg in Skarsgård's brother, Bill Skarsgård's brother, the other Skarsgård. Well, I guess there's a ton of Skarsgårds. Anyway, December 11th is when this one premieres, and I'm proceeding with cautious optimism, but I don't know, man. I don't know. Red Team go. I guess we'll find out here in a few months if it can actually expand in, you know, without the television constraints of the original one from '94, which I adore, by the way. It's a terrific one. So revisit it in the meantime if you can. Just got a recent Blu-ray release too. Next up, we have The Breathing Method. The Breathing Method, Scott Derrickson, the dude who I know he got some initial attention with Sinister, if I remember correctly. So he started in horror before segueing over into making Doctor Strange for Marvel, but recently left that project over creative differences. So the Breathing Method being the only story from different seasons that has not been adapted, it's really, aside from the fact that Apt Pupil is more of like a thriller character study of sorts, the Breathing Method is the one that is full on like just scary and deals with our little secret society club of sorts, which you, I'm trying to remember what the heck they were called. It's a dress if I remember, but yeah, the man who wouldn't shake hands, and it's also mentioned in at least another story or two. But it's about these old, very high society guys and telling a story about this woman who is pregnant, being rushed to the hospital, gets decapitated while in labor, and just continues having that kid. So I don't know. That's one that, it's a very odd story, but I do feel like you could expand upon it enough to turn it into a feature as opposed to needing it to be like an anthology segment or something like that. So another one that I'm actually very curious about is Blumhouse. Remake of Firestarter, man. Now, yes, we did have the Firestarter rekindled sequel with Girl from Wet Hot and the Mighty Ducks, and I reviewed that here on the channel. Malcolm McDowell was also in that. I don't hate that like some people. I found some merits in the full-on, like, borderline X-Men expansion of what they did with that, and I guess I didn't see the original with Drew Barrymore at a young enough age to have that sort of affinity. I feel like that, I like the score, and I like some of the chemistry between her and the father, but man, George C. Scott as a Native American, the murderous man, it just didn't fly for me, even though I love Patton and, you know, it's Third Exorcist and stuff. So Firestarter is definitely one with the psychedelic aspect of the powers and the pyrokinesis and everything that I think could be really turned into something terrific with modern special effects. And one of the last reports I was reading, they said that there's going to be like people's faces melting off and basically all the stuff that, you know, there's just people running around in like fire suits really in that other one, and some buildings blowing up. And so for an R rating, it was relatively tame, I will contend. So yeah, bring on another Firestarter. It is actually, as y'all see back there, it is the book of the month right now here on Hail to Stephen King. We do a monthly book club. First Saturday of the new month, live. That's where we have some palaver and some live discussion about it here in the horror show, so that's fun. Next up is, oh boy, you know, we just recently heard that Eyes of the Dragon, the pilot, filmed for Hulu. Ain't happening, but there's still the possibility another network could pick it up, just like, I mean, yeah, we're still hoping for that Dark Tower series, or for Mike Flanagan to make it, like he said, but no official word on that yet, but I'm sad about Eyes of the Dragon not happening. But another just detouring the fantasy that is apparently back on track is Amblin Entertainment, which is Spielberg's company, obviously. You got the ET logo going down there. Is the tale of Jack Sawyer and, you know, just jumping into the territories and his homie Speedy Parkus and his Uncle Morgan Sloat and all that different stuff. That's something that I still feel like would be better served not as a feature, but as a limited series, with the fact that it is just so extensive. All the different places that you visit, from the tap room where he's the indentured servant to that home for like wayward boys or whatever. There's so many facets to the Talisman, man. If they made a couple Talisman movies, which I doubt they'll do, I know to my homegirl Sarah, who's on this panel for Phoenix FearCon, she loves the sequel, Black House, but the Talisman, back on track at Amblin Entertainment per an Entertainment Weekly report from about 6-7 months ago, but keep in mind, everybody, that production on so many projects has stalled because of the pandemic that we have experienced this year, which is why so much that has been announced, in all likelihood, is still in some form of development, but everything has been slowed or ground to a halt, at least for the time being, as the industry is trying to get its shizzle back together. As this just massive amount of discussion continues, everybody. So another interesting little short called The Boogeyman that was previously adapted, I believe, as a Dollar Baby, or maybe it was just an installment on a television series. God dang, I cannot recall. I'm putting my money on the Dollar Baby. I've seen it. It's on YouTube. It's actually pretty solid, you know, about this guy who claims there's this, you know, person in this closet at his home, and it's messed with him and the family and everything like that. And yeah, it's just slowly driving him mad, and there's a twist ending. I think it was released together on home video along with The Woman in the Room, which is Frank Darabont's first just excursion into adapting King, and helped get him the job for Shawshank. So yeah, the Boogeyman, that's definitely one that I'm down for it. I'm down for. And now don't get it confused with the film that had homie from Seventh Heaven in it. I forget his name, but it's complete own thing. So another one that James Wan is working on, y'all. New version of the Tommyknockers. Tommyknockers is a book that I feel like gets a lot of crap, especially since it was kind of the turning point for King to realize his substance abuse was getting out of control, man. His family did the, just showing him his trash that had, the empty vials of Coke and beer bottles and half-smoked joints and all this different stuff. So he was hitting it pretty hard. The intervention transpired, but really the TV series, aside from that dude from NYPD Blue, and yeah, that's about it. The special effects are incredibly dated, laughable at times. Aliens at the end look terrible. I really enjoyed, even though that is a bloated book, King segueing into sci-fi whenever he does occasionally do it. And so for that reason, I'm very hopeful with an R rating and modern technology, we can get past the silliness of Tracy Lords shooting people with green lasers. That is pretty bad. Dark Half. Getting another adaptation, everybody. MGM is behind this one. I talked with my dude Mike Kearns about this recently from Mike's Book Reviews. We were tweeting about it, and he was like, yo, for whatever reason, I really thought that another teaming of George A. Romero and Stephen King was going to be great because everybody loved Creepshow. But there's like a more distinctively schlocky homage aspect to those old EC comics that those two grew up on. I feel like that's why that worked. Dark Half, for whatever reason, and I love Timothy's performance and some of the makeup work and the whole meta aspect of King and, burying the pseudonym and all this different stuff, but it's a story he's explored a lot as far as that aspect of duality, and in some aspects I think he did it better with Secret Window, Secret Garden, from 4 Past Midnight, which was last month's Book of the Month here. So I'm definitely cool with a modern take on that. Even though I didn't hate the last one, it was just as, Mike and I were discussing, just kind of meh. I don't know. Didn't do it for me. And speaking of another one, and that's why I placed these two together, Rest Stop. Now, Rest Stop is a story, I'm trying to recall which bit it was collected in, but regardless, it's another one about a writer who basically, he was at like a mystery writers sort of like convention or whatever, speaking engagement. I forget the specific details because it's been a moment since I read it, but he basically gets off at this rest stop and he overhears some nasty domestic violence going down, and so he's scared as all hell, doesn't want to do anything, but he reverts into this alter ego that he is written as and embraced, who's a tough guy, takes out a tire iron and beats the hell out of dude and saves the woman, essentially. And breaks homie's glasses too, if I remember, so I won't follow him. But yeah, so this is one that dealing with those same bits of having, an alter ego, different person that you can just kind of click on in scary situations like this where you have to kind of nut up. And yeah, this is another one that, despite exploring similar themes, if they're working on this and the Dark Half again, I don't know. It wasn't like a personal favorite, but yeah. Curious though, nonetheless. Then as we continue forging through all of this, My Pretty Pony. Short story basically about this dying grandfather talking with his grandson about just the nature of life, and the Pretty Pony is basically a metaphor for just for the way I interpreted it, the fact that life is fleeting and yet you can't really take as much out of it if you don't properly care for like said animal. It's apparently got Tobin Bell, I think his name is starring in it, and he was main dude in Saw, the main antagonist bad guy. So this is a story that's rather heartfelt and more along the lines of the next one that is getting adaptation, yet not the sort of adaptation that you would think of, and that's Hearts in Atlantis. But this is Johannes Roberts, who did The Other Side of the Door and 47 Meters Down. I mean, he's stylistically, he's a director that I enjoy. He doesn't always have the best scripts, regrettably, but he is essentially, he's done Hearts in Atlantis, but just the second part of the collection of novellas. So about all the kids who are just like freshmen in college and getting just caught up with being addicted to hearts, some of them flunking out, but there's also a love story between our main protagonist in that story and the little Gerber girl, who's Andy Garfield's love interest in the previous story, the Low Men. And yeah, I do really love that one. King has said that it's one near and dear to his heart because it was essentially about the beginning of his college experience and some similar things that he went through. So I'm down for this. The fact that it was obviously omitted and because they wanted just complete cohesion in the previous film with Anthony Hopkins and rest peacefully Anton Yelchin. So I'm down for this one, man. Next up, The Girl Who Loved Tom Gordon. They've been in fact, George A. Romero was trying to make this at one particular point, but yeah, apparently a different It producer, so neither of the Muccetti siblings, but somebody else who worked on It is behind this one, and they're saying it's happening. It's a short read. This girl, who gets lost in the woods, and life is teeth, and sometimes it bites. It's a very simple story. She gets she's out there for days and days and days and just trying to survive. It's we do get kind of a supernatural element eventually, but this is one I don't necessarily know if it needs to be R-rated, because it does have a little bit of a YA feel at times. But yeah, Girl Who Loved Tom Gordon, it's one that's never been adapted previously, and I would love to see it. Next, from a Buick 8 that I was just talking with somebody in the Hail to Stephen King Facebook group, because there's a Hail to Stephen King Facebook group, everybody, if you want some further palaver just beyond these weekly videos with me. So the director of Stakeland, according to Thomas Jane, who is producing it, and apparently there is word that he will star in it as well, or at least be part of an ensemble. This is one about that basically if the Low Men had a car that ended up in police impound, and that I feel like if they went with more of a direct narrative with this as opposed to some of the time jumping that King does, which is a little confusing and it's a little slow burny, and also if they go for a little bit more carnage of what this car is capable of, this could be really sweet. And I have not personally seen Stakeland, but Cecil swears by it, says it's really rad status. So boy, we are nearing we're like 2/3 of the way through, everybody. So thanks for the patience and for sticking around and just getting this proper update. Next up, The Gingerbread Girl. This is a film that is being done by the director of Storm of the Century, which I love Storm of the Century, so that does intrigue me. This is about a girl who's jogging down in Florida, and she is basically kidnapped and presumably about to have horrible things happen. And it's got some similar DNA to like Big Driver in a lot of ways, and so I actually thought Rhea Bella's performance was great in that, and this is one that I feel could be very empowering to women, and but it's also it's kind of grisly and messed up. It's been a minute since I read it. I believe it was just after Sunset that it was collected in. It was either that or Eventual, but nonetheless, it's a solid story and definitely another one of these, King writing from a lady's perspective that he did so well with, like, Rose Madder, and just rising up from these abusive and quite probably life-threatening sort of situations. Now, this is one that we have not got an update on in almost a year, but it is apparently still listed on tons of slates everywhere, and that is an adaptation of N that is being done by Gaumont Television. Although, for whatever reason, they're retitling 8. 8 is a good number, I guess you would probably say. But yeah, nonetheless, N is one that, between the digital comic and the physical one that they put together and expanded upon the story for Marvel Comics, I love N. It's one of the creepiest things King has ever written, at least for me. It's about the possibility of insanity being contagious, and it's about this therapist who has this guy who has gone to a field with these rocks in it, and are there 7 rocks or are there 8 rocks? Probably the connotation they're trying to make here, but yeah, with such a vague title, and I guess the original was a very vague title, that spot, this weird secluded field, is potentially a thinny, like a portal to areas where some of the nastiest Lovecraftian monsters could potentially exist. So I'm down for it if it has the proper budget. That's what, and some solid stars in it too, because you would need some really on-point acting for this to be something special. Next up, we have one that was just about finished before all of this, Rona stuff went down, and that was Lacy's story. Lacy's story about a woman whose prominent author husband passes away, and she slowly investigates his secret place where he went to write. It's got a super psychedelic aspect in it, starring none other than Julianne Moore, and also Dane DeHaan as an obsessive fan, which is where, for me, the novel at least went into more retread territory than I would like. But it's on Apple Plus, and Stephen King penned the entire series, so I still am spending like my $4 or $5 a month or whatever, with hopes that this one makes its arrival soon, which I'm stoked about. And we are nearly in the home stretch, everybody. Who loves Joyland? I thought Joyland was a tremendous coming-of-age story that King put together under the hard case crime just banner, so not his typical Scribner, or even Grant, who he's produced the Dark Tower stuff through, and a couple other things here and there. But Freeform, that used to be none other than the Disney Channel. They've rebranded themselves and tried to get into a little bit more edgy entertainment, but still, this isn't a story that needs to be super edgy, really. I mean, it's about this kid, he drops out of college after his him and his sweetheart breakup. He goes down to, it's either North or South Carolina, I forget which one, but he's in the Carolinas and he's working at this amusement park in the early 70s, and he gets involved with an older woman who has a chronically ill child. I mean, really, it's a story about friendship. It does get kind of a otherworldly essence without spoiling stuff, but I do feel like this is one, despite being a shorter book, that could be expanded into a series. I don't know if they could go like Haven or Dead Zone status or anything with it. I don't know if the concept could last more than like a couple seasons or like an event series, whatever, but I'm down for Joyland. Who else is? Let me know in the comments below. Last couple, My Lady 1, another story about a killer car. This one has, I believe, a couple siblings, if I remember, that just get involved with this nasty machine that is like running over and just murderously. And it's definitely in that same vein of stuff we've seen before with From a Buick 8 and with obviously Maximum Overdrive and Christine, stuff like that. But it had some of its own flavor. It's a novella, so it's beyond the short story. And this is going to be a film from the producer of 1922, which I thought was a great Netflix adaptation starring Thomas Jane. So yeah, man, more killer car stuff with King, as long as they have some of the brutal kills properly done, like in that novella, because it gets a little bad. I'm definitely down. And plus, stuff with her heroic kids, it takes me back to my childhood. I enjoy the hell out of that. Drunken Fireworks, James Franco's been trying to get this made basically since he narrated the short story, and it's basically about these two feuding families trying to outdo each other with their 4th of July fireworks displays. It's silly, it's full of dark comedy. I thought Franco was far better in 11/22/63 than I was ever anticipating. That is an awesome adaptation that was on Hulu, produced by J.J. Abrams, way better than, I mean, honestly, when I'm probably, as I'll say on my FearCon panel, probably in my top 3 favorite King adaptations, but this is obviously nowhere near as heart-wrenching and awesomely emotional and romantic and time travel. Now, Drunken Fireworks is a pretty basic tale, but it's a fun one. I still kind of feel like it would probably lend itself more so not to a feature, but to an anthology segment of some sort, but it's not scary, so keep that in mind. Next up, The Bone Church is apparently from the Colorado Kid team, the peeps who did Haven. They're putting together this adaptation of this weird, like, murderous kind of chanty thing that I believe it was in Bizarre Bad Dreams. I can't say I remember this one super well. It was a poem, so it definitely didn't give as much framing, and so you gotta have a lot to, you have to have a lot of fresh, solid ideas to expand upon the Bone Church pretty well. I believe it was called The Bone Church A Chant, or in any event, it's one I need to revisit. Sleeping Beauties is getting the Double Down treatment, so I wasn't the biggest fan of the novel with him and his son Owen, but I've loved at least the artwork so far in the comic book series that is currently ongoing. Still though, this was a solid enough concept of all the women in the world just suddenly falling asleep, and if they are awakened, it is like Crazy's rage zombie status, and it was just a little bloated, a little lengthy, but perhaps that would serve itself better for a television series. They would need to get a very solid ensemble and just be hopeful it doesn't become what Under the Dome eventually did. That was pretty rough, man. So as we just make our way through our last couple here, there is a new Children of the Corn film. I don't think it's a sequel to Runaway, which is pretty embarrassingly bad. I like the Sci-Fi Channel version, though, but nonetheless, it's the most sequelized of all Stephen King stuff, and the fact that they filmed one in Australia in quarantine, I believe from what I understand of the story, it is technically kind of a prequel to the OG and to, you know, the short story, so I'll at least check it out, but boy, a lot of those Children of the Corn films are pretty rough, man. Not the biggest fan. Also, King's The Institute, his most recent full-on novel, as opposed to, you know, our recent collection of novellas that we had with If It Bleeds. But The Institute was basically King trying to out Stranger Things, and even before the book was released, it was already optioned by the Mr. Mercedes team. So, yeah, Mr. Mercedes and The Outsider. I didn't love The Institute, you know, but you know, nonetheless, it is what it is, and I will still most definitely watch it. You know, aside from going through Haven and The Dead Zone, I've watched every Stephen King adaptation or sequel or even loosely based on. So then we got the recent announcement that HBO Max is developing Overlook, which is a prequel to The Shining. People were working on something similar. I believe it was even Glenn Mazzara, maybe? Don't quote me there. But yes, there was a similar project in development as a feature film, I believe, that was exploring the history of this hotel and just a lot of the nasty stuff in like those newspaper clippings, presumably. But also there was a prologue called Before the Play, which I will be reviewing before the end of the year in celebration of 40 years of The Shining film. And yeah, Overlook series, though, that's another one where if they did a Derry series, I think there's enough expandability in comparison with what they did with Castle Rock, where it could be pretty friggin' good. Okay, so then another HBO Max that they're working on, Throttle. They're turning the Joe Hill and Stephen King collaboration that was an homage to Richard Matheson's Duel into a feature. And that's one that, if you're not familiar with it, it was also adapted in the comic form, and it's about a gang of bikers that cook meth, and they are essentially on the run from this huge 18-wheeler who was trying to pick them all off. It's brutal, it's fun, and yes, check out the comic if you have not, because it's solid status stuff, man. Then next we have the Revelations of Becca Paulsen, which I still scratch my head why this is happening. It's going to be a limited series on the CW. King originally published this as its own thing about this woman who thinks her husband is cheating, and that she decides at the behest of her Jesus doll to kill him, and it was folded into the Tommyknockers. So the fact that it was even adapted years later in, it was in the 90s, it was a Twilight Zone episode maybe, or an episode of Monsters. It was one of those anthologies. It had the mom from Home Alone in it, who's a great actress in her own right. Lots of awesome stuff on Schmidt Creek and all the collaborations with, Kristopher Guest and whatnot. But yeah, so they're apparently wanting to redo this one, and I can't say I know why, but okay, bring it on, I guess. It's going to be for the CW TV. And as we round out just our last couple, Little Green God of Agony, which is apparently from the Walking Dead co-showrunner, and Lionsgate is putting this together. This is a story about this extremely rich guy who's in this plane crash, and he's been trying to rehab for the longest time, and he claims the reason he is not improving and getting any better is because of the fact that there is this little green, like, demon dude in him that is preventing him from rehabbing and his bones and his body healing properly. I dig the motion comic that they did on Stephen King's website, and you can watch and read and stuff for free. I've been wanting to do a review of that for the longest time, because that's one of my favorites from Bizarro Bad Dreams. Really, really good. And lastly, If It Bleeds, we have pretty much all of those in development currently. So you've got Mr. Harrigan's Phone that is happening. We also have excuse me, Life of Chuck, my personal favorite. David Fincher's production company is behind that one. That is what gets me stoked as hell. Lastly, Ben Stiller has apparently optioned Rat, the final story about this writer in seclusion, dealing with writer's blocks. He's a strange animal that comes to him, monkey paw aspects, without really spoiling too much, but to apparently star and direct. I know he directed Reality Bites, and I think he did Walter Mitty, done a few other things. Not a bad director, but, and even though it's not been announced yet, I still speculate that another season of The Outsider will be adapted off of our title story. But as of now, only 3 of those 4 being made, and if I recall correctly, Harrigan's Fun is going to Netflix, and I don't remember the destinations of the others, if they'll be theatrical or whatever. There is essentially so much influx in Hollywood right now, and I hope that we can get a little bit more of this under control, and if, filming does begin again, proper safety measures and all that other stuff. But that is your massive rundown in celebration of Sai King's birthday here on the 21st of September, turning 73. Heil! Word Slinger. Love you, man. And what are you most excited about of all of these adaptations? Or if there is one like Doomakey or Rose Madder, that is in development. Oh my lord, and I forgot to mention that Revival was also recently mentioned as being in development, with Mike Flanagan producing, writing, possibly directing. We don't know just yet. I've spoken so much about Revival on this channel. If you haven't read Revival, go out right now and do that. I can't believe I almost forgot that, but it's because of the fact that there is just a staggering amount of King stuff. So I guess I stand corrected that the King-sance has not concluded as I speculated last year about. So I've been Jaime and Fuego. Y'all have been Rad Status. You can find me on all social media sectors like Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, here on YouTube, where I do have my own personal channel called Infuegotainment. Recently braved the theaters and reviewed Tenet. Boy, what else? I just reviewed for Netflix, The Devil You Know, I believe is what it's called. It's got an excellent all-star cast, period piece, about just the evils of religious manipulation, stuff like that. Make sure to like, share, subscribe here, and check out the Hail to Stephen King Facebook group, as I said, and also check out Firestarter before the first Saturday in October when we do our live discussion. So I guess that's the end of the proceedings today, y'all, and until the Wheel of Ka comes around once more, hasta luego, amigos, constant readers and viewers alike, say thank you for your time today. And it was a little lengthier, and it was an arduous amount of information, but if you made it this far, you all appreciate it, to quote Pac, and yes, I'm hopeful we share more of this palaver sooner rather than later, and until then, stay scared and read Stephen King. Feliz cumpleaños, El Rey.